March 21st, 1987. Atlantic City, Caesar's Palace. Picture this. Dean Martin is standing under hot stage lights in front of 4,800 people who paid good money to see a legend. He's halfway through That's Amore, that song everyone and their grandmother knows, and he's doing what he does best, being Dean Martin. Cool, untouchable, the guy who made looking effortless look effortless. Then something happens. Mid-chorus, mid-note, mid-everything, Dean just stops. Freezes completely. His eyes lock onto something in the wings. Stage right. And you can see it. The exact moment his face turns to stone. The microphone slips from his fingers and hits the floor with this dull, wet thud that echoes through the sound system. Without a word, without a gesture, without giving a single damn about the 4,800 people staring at him, he turns and walks off stage. The audience laughs. They think it's part of the act. Classic Dean, right? Always the improviser, always the showman. But backstage, Dean Martin's world just ended. His son, his only son, Dean Paul, was dead. Gone. Erased from existence while Dean was probably doing a sound check or cracking jokes with the crew. The next 72 hours would peel back every layer of the Dean Martin persona. Every bit of cool, every ounce of that unshakable swagger the world worshipped. What they'd find underneath wasn't pretty. It was a father so completely hollowed out, so fundamentally broken, that he would never, and I mean never, put himself back together again. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Dean Paul Martin was. Not just Dean Martin's kid, not just another celebrity offspring coasting on daddy's name. Dean Paul was the reason Dean Martin got out of bed in the morning. He was his father's pride, his legacy, his entire damn reason for existing. Dean Paul Martin, born November 17th, 1951. His old man called him Dino. Here's the thing about being the kid of a megastar. It usually destroys you. The pressure, the comparisons, the constant shadow of someone who's already conquered the world, it breaks most people. They crumble, they rebel, they end up as cautionary tales in tabloids. Not Dino. This kid thrived, not because he had to prove something, but because he was genuinely, authentically talented in his own right. Start with tennis. He wasn't just pretty good at tennis. The guy competed at a professional level as a teenager. We're talking junior tournaments, rankings, the whole deal. He could have made a career out of it if he wanted. But then he got into music, formed this rock group called Dino, Desi, and Billy with Desi Arnaz Jr., yeah, Lucy and Desi's kid, and Billy Hinchy. And here's the kicker. They weren't a gimmick. They actually made it. 3 albums, real chart positions. Not because of their famous dads, but because teenage girls in the 60s genuinely dug their sound. Then there was acting. Films, television, the occasional guest spot. He had that Martin charisma, that natural ease in front of cameras. But none of that. Not the tennis, not the music, not the acting. None of it was Dean Paul's real passion. His real love was the sky. He became a major in the California Air National Guard. Flew F-4 Phantoms. Those massive screaming fighter jets that could break the sound barrier and make your chest cavity vibrate from a mile away. This wasn't some cushy honorary position either. Dean Paul was the real deal. A trained combat pilot who could handle one of the most sophisticated aircraft in the American arsenal. He was everything his father dreamed he'd be. Talented, yes, but also humble, fearless, the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. And Dean Martin, the guy who built an entire career on seeming like he didn't care about anything, the man who made indifference an art form. When it came to Dino, that mask didn't just slip. It completely disintegrated. Look, Dean Martin's whole shtick was being unshakable. The perpetually drunk but not really drunk guy who floated through life like nothing mattered. He cultivated this image of supreme detachment. Like the universe could explode around him and he'd just sip his scotch and crack a joke about it. That's how he built his empire, on the myth that Dean Martin gave zero fucks about anything. But here's what nobody talks about, that armor. That carefully constructed persona of cool indifference? It was exactly that. A persona. An act. And when it came to his son, that act fell apart completely. Everyone who knew them, family, friends, crew members who worked Dean's shows for decades, they all said the same thing. Dean Paul wasn't just Dean's favorite kid. That's too simple, too reductive. He was his father's other half. his alter ego, the version of himself Dean wished he could have been if fame and Hollywood and all that machinery hadn't gotten in the way. Their bond transcended normal father-son dynamics. They were brothers in spirit, best friends who happened to share DNA. By spring of 1987, Dean is 69 years old. The golden years of his career are decades behind him. He's still taking gigs, Atlantic City, Reno, the occasional casino circuit. But everyone knows it's not the same. The shows have lost their electricity. The venues aren't quite as prestigious. And Dean himself? He's falling apart. 6 decades of cigarettes have turned his lungs into a disaster zone. Chronic bronchitis is now just a permanent feature of his existence. That voice, the one that used to flow like silk, smooth and effortless, it's raspy now. Rough. You can hear the damage in every note. But somehow, impossibly, he still has it. That magnetism, that presence, people still melt when he walks on stage. The magic might be fading, but it's not gone. Not yet. What nobody realizes, not the audiences, not the promoters, probably not even Dean himself, is that he's running on fumes. And the only thing keeping those fumes burning is knowing that somewhere out there, his son is flying fighter jets and living the life Dean always romanticized. The life of someone truly free. Saturday night, Dean shows up at Caesar's Palace around 6:30 in the evening. Tommy Rosetti, his tour manager, a guy who's been working with Dean for 15 years and has seen every version of the man, immediately notices something's off. Not bad off, just different. Dean arrived an hour early. Dean Martin doesn't arrive early. Dean Martin arrives exactly when Dean Martin needs to arrive, usually with about 45 seconds to spare before showtime. But that's not even the weird part. The weird part is that Dean seems light, almost playful. He's cracking jokes with the backup singers, asking the lighting techs about their families. There's this energy radiating off him that Tommy hasn't seen in years, maybe decades. Tommy would later describe it like this. It was like somebody reached into Dean and turned on a switch that had been off since the 70s. The old Dean was back, the guy who actually gave a damn about the people around him. What Tommy didn't know, what nobody backstage knew, was why. That morning, Dean had talked to his son on the phone. Nothing special, just a regular call. Dean Paul had dialed from Vandenberg Air Force Base where he was stationed, getting ready for some routine training exercises. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Dino talked about the flights going well, about how clear the weather had been, about how much he loved being in the cockpit, how flying made him feel more alive than anything else in the world. And then, right before hanging up, Dean Paul said it. "Love you, Pop." Dean said it back. "Love you too, kid. Proud of you. Always have been." An ordinary conversation, the kind they'd had 100 times before. Nothing profound, nothing dramatic. Just a father and son checking in, confirming what they both already knew. Neither of them had any idea it would be their last words to each other. That phone call is why Dean showed up early, why he was cracking jokes, why, for one brief shining moment, he seemed like the man he used to be. He didn't know he was saying goodbye to his son. He thought he was just saying, "See you later." 8:45 p.m. Dean walks onto that stage. The applause hits him like a physical wave. 4,800 people on their feet, screaming, cheering, losing their minds because they're in the same room as Dean Martin. A living legend. An icon from an era that feels like a beautiful dream nobody wants to wake up from. He's wearing a white tuxedo. Perfect. Pristine. Looking every bit the star he's supposed to be. The big band kicks in. That lush, full sound that defined an entire generation. And Dean launches into his opening number like he's done 10,000 times before. The room explodes. People are whistling, stomping, completely losing themselves in the moment. This is what they came for. This is the magic they paid to see. And Dean delivers. Of course he delivers. He glides through the set list with the precision of a surgeon. Volare. You're nobody till somebody loves you. Ain't that a kick in the head? Every song lands exactly the way it's supposed to. The audience sings along to every chorus, every bridge, every note they know by heart. For 85 minutes, it feels like time travel. Like Atlantic City in 1987 has somehow become Atlantic City in 1962. The Golden Age resurrected for one more night. Around 10:10 p.m., Dean transitions into That's Amore. This is the song, the one that defined him, the one that outcharted Elvis Presley back when that actually meant something. It's bigger than a hit. It's a cultural artifact, a piece of American DNA. The couples in the audience start swaying, holding each other, lost in that old-school romance that Dean's voice somehow still captures, even with the rasp, even with the damage. His voice fills the room, not as smooth as it used to be, not as powerful, but still magic, still Dean Martin. And then, right in the middle of the song, right as he's building toward the chorus, something changes. Stage right, Tommy Rosetti appears in the wings. He's holding a phone. One of those bulky service phones they used backstage, and his face looks like he's just watched someone die. He's trying to get Dean's attention without disrupting the performance, waving subtly at first, then more urgently, then desperately. Dean catches the movement in his peripheral vision, right in the middle of a high note, and he stops, just stops, mid-word, mid-breath. The band doesn't realize what's happening at first. They keep playing, keep going through the arrangement like muscle memory, waiting for Dean to come back in. It takes maybe 10 seconds before they notice, before the trumpet player looks up, before the pianist's hands slow, before the whole thing falls apart and dies. The audience thinks this is part of the show, some kind of bit, vintage Dean improvisation. So they wait, expectant, excited to see where this goes. Dean is staring at Tommy Rosetti, and if you were there, if you were close enough to see his face in that moment, you'd understand. Something broke, something fundamental. You could see it happen in real time. His expression doesn't change. That's the terrifying part. His face doesn't contort or collapse. It just empties. Like someone reached in and scooped out everything that made Dean Martin Dean Martin. He speaks into the microphone. 2 words. There's trouble. Not panicked, not emotional, just flat. Mechanical. The voice of a man who's already somewhere else entirely. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen? He sets the microphone down on top of the grand piano. Doesn't drop it, doesn't throw it. Just places it there, gentle and precise, like he's tucking in a child. Then he walks off stage. The audience applauds. They're still thinking this is theater, a planned intermission. Maybe he's coming back with a surprise guest or a costume change or some other Vegas-style spectacle. The band starts playing film music, that generic, pleasant jazz you play when you need to cover dead air. But backstage, the apocalypse is happening. Tommy Rosetti is standing there with tears streaming down his face. Not crying. That implies sound, implies movement? No, he's just standing there, perfectly still with water pouring from his eyes like his body has given up on processing grief and is just leaking it out. Dean reaches him, opens his mouth to ask what's wrong. Tommy can't speak, literally cannot form words. His throat has seized up, so he just extends his arm and hands Dean the phone. On the other end is a major general from the California Air National Guard. Mr. Martin, the voice says. Military crisp, professional. The tone of someone who's delivered this news before. This is regarding your son, Major Dean Paul Martin. Dean's fingers start shaking. You can see the tremor, the phone rattling against his ear. Tell me. Sir, I'm calling to inform you that your son's aircraft went down during a training exercise this afternoon, approximately 3:40 p.m. The plane crashed in the San Gorgonio mountain range. There were no survivors. Dean drops the phone. It hits the concrete floor and shatters into pieces, plastic and circuits scattering across the ground. He doesn't scream, doesn't cry out, doesn't do any of the things you'd expect a father to do upon hearing his son is dead. He just stands there, frozen, staring at nothing, staring through the walls, through reality itself, into some void the rest of us can't see. Tommy reaches out to steady him, to touch his shoulder, to offer something, anything resembling human comfort. Dean flinches away, not aggressively, just away. Like Tommy's hand is something dangerous, something that might shatter whatever fragile structure is holding him together. He starts walking, slow, mechanical, like his body is operating on autopilot while his consciousness has evacuated entirely, heading toward his dressing room. The venue director comes running up, out of breath, panicked because the show has stopped and nobody knows why. Dean, what's happening? Do we need to cancel? What do I tell people? Dean stops walking, turns, looks at the director with eyes that have gone completely dead. My son doesn't exist anymore. That's how he says it. Not my son is dead, or I lost my son, or any of the normal ways people communicate tragedy. No, my son doesn't exist anymore. Like Dino has been erased from the fundamental code of reality. 4 words hanging in the air like a death sentence. The director doesn't ask another question. He just runs. Sprints back to the stage and grabs a microphone and announces that, due to an emergency, tonight's performance is canceled. Refunds will be processed. Please exit calmly. The audience starts filing out. Confused, concerned. 90% of them have no idea what just happened. They won't know until tomorrow morning when they open their newspapers and see the headline. Inside the dressing room, Dean sits down in a chair, still in his white tuxedo, still perfectly dressed for a show that will never finish. Tommy stands by the door, completely lost. What do you do? What do you say to a man whose entire world just imploded? The silence stretches out forever. Minutes that feel like hours. Tommy doesn't move. Dean doesn't move. The whole room feels suspended in time, like reality is holding its breath. Finally, Dean speaks, his voice distant, hollow, coming from somewhere far away. We talked this morning. He told me I was his hero. Tommy nods, tears still streaming down his face, unable to form words. Dean continues, not really talking to Tommy. Talking to the air? To himself? To God, maybe. He loved flying, loved it more than anything. Said it was the only place he felt real freedom. The only place where nothing else mattered. He stands up abruptly. The sudden movement after so much stillness is jarring. Take me to Jean. I need to see Jean. Jean Martin, his ex-wife, Dean Paul's mother. They'd divorced back in 1973 after the marriage finally collapsed under the weight of Dean's lifestyle. But they'd stayed connected, united by their kids, by the family they'd built, even if the marriage couldn't survive. Tommy arranges a car, a black limousine that feels absurdly formal for what's happening, like showing up to a funeral in a party bus. The drive to Bel Air is silent. Dean sits in the back seat, staring out the window at the nighttime ocean of lights streaming past. Atlantic City giving way to highways, giving way to suburbs. The world continuing like nothing's changed. Like the universe didn't just rip itself in half. Tommy sits next to him, wanting to say something comforting, something meaningful, and realizing there are no words. There is no combination of syllables that makes this better. So he stays quiet. When they pull up to Jean's mansion, she's already standing on the front steps. Someone called ahead. Someone told her. Her eyes are red and swollen. Her face is distorted by grief. She's been crying for hours. Dean gets out of the car, moves toward her slowly like he's walking underwater. When he reaches her, when he's standing right there in front of the woman he used to love, the woman who gave him his son, something finally breaks. He collapses into her arms. And for the first time, the very first time since that phone call, Dean Martin falls apart. He sobs. Deep, wrenching sobs that sound like they're being torn from his chest. The kind of crying that comes from a place of pain so profound that everyone who witnesses it will carry it with them forever. Jean holds him. They cry together. 2 people who built a life, who created a human being, who watched that human being grow into someone extraordinary, now mourning the fact that he's gone. Just gone. Erased. The next morning, March 22nd, 1987, the news detonates everywhere. Dean Paul Martin, son of Dean Martin, killed in plane crash. The media descends like vultures. Cameras, microphones, reporters camping outside the family homes, hungry for grief, for tears, for any scrap of tragedy they can package and sell. Here's what actually happened. Dean Paul was flying an F-4 Phantom over the San Gorgonio mountain range. Routine training exercise. Except the weather was brutal. Heavy clouds, zero visibility, the kind of conditions that turn flying into gambling with your life. At 3:40 p.m., his plane vanished from radar. Just gone. They deployed search and rescue immediately. But the terrain was impossible. Jagged rocks, steep cliffs, dense forest. It took 4 days to find the wreckage. When they did, it confirmed what everyone already knew. Dean Paul and his co-pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, were dead. The impact had been catastrophic. High speed. No chance. March 26th, Arlington National Cemetery. Full military honors. Thousands of people showed up. Family, fellow pilots, celebrities, fans. Dean sat in the front row wearing dark sunglasses, trying to hide his face. When the honor guard handed him the folded flag, Dean pressed it against his chest and wept openly. No more pretense, no more cool. Just a destroyed father burying his child. Frank Sinatra delivered the eulogy, his voice shaking as he talked about Dean Paul's courage, his talent, his kindness. Then he looked directly at Dean. Dino, no words can heal this, but we loved your boy, and we love you. Dean didn't respond, just sat there clutching that flag, staring at his son's casket. After the funeral, Dean Martin vanished, canceled everything, stopped answering calls. Friends who visited described him as a living corpse, sitting in darkness, drinking, watching old videos of Dino on repeat. In 1988, he tried one last comeback, a reunion tour with Frank and Sammy Davis Jr. After 3 shows, he walked off, told Frank, "Every time I'm on stage, I see him. I can't pretend anymore." Frank understood, just hugged him, said, "I love you, brother." Dean spent his final years alone, watching old movies, drinking, thinking about his son. Christmas morning, 1995. Dean Martin died at home, 78 years old. Official cause, respiratory failure. Real cause, broken heart. At his funeral, Deanna said, "My father never recovered. For 8 years he carried this grief. Now he's finally with Dino again." Here's the truth about grief. It doesn't care who you are, superstar or nobody. When you lose a child, the pain is identical. There's a recording from that night, March 21st, 1987. You can hear Dean singing "That's Amore." Then silence. Confusion. The exact moment his life shattered forever. Dean once said, "I'd give everything to have my son back. The money, the fame, all of it. I'd trade my entire career for one more day with Dino." He never got that day. None of us do. That's the cruelest truth there is.